Bill number 360-33.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that Bill 360-33 be placed in the third reading, and I would like to discuss it, please.
You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, Bill 360-33 pertains to the transfer of property, small piece of property in Talafofo, where there currently exists a small power plant, and GPA has been sitting on that property, but for whatever reason, that property still remains in the hands of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And so what Bill 360 proposes to do then is to formally transfer ownership of that property over from the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to the Guam Power Authority. However, it will be done so at a reasonable compensation to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And so then on page 2, section 2, it talks about the authorization to transfer land to Guam Power Authority, and it sets out certain conditions. One is that GPA will pay for the appraisal of the property. It will have the property surveyed and registered at its own expense, and then GPA shall work with the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to determine an appropriate compensation for the property, and then the proceeds from that sale will then, when Chamorro Land Trust receives it, those proceeds will go into an account called the Chamorro Land Trust Infrastructure and Survey Fund. And that account is actually used to start accumulating funds for the purpose of surveying Chamorro Land Trust properties, and eventually putting in infrastructure. So that's what Bill 360-33 does, and it's really a very simple transaction. We just need to formalize it through legislation. And then, of course, once we've acted on this, there's also an accompanying bill which proposes to basically then will purchase the adjacent property, and we can discuss that when we get to Bill 361.
You're right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll just finish this one. So on the motion, Senator, you want recess? Okay, brief recess. The legislature is back in session. Senator Tony Anna, what's your question? You do have the floor.
Oh, no, Madam Speaker, I conferred with the author of the legislation and everything's good. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Anyone else who'd like to speak on the motion? There being none, then, Senator, you want to close? You want to send it down?
You can just send it down.
On the motion to send 360-33 to the third reading file without any objection, so ordered. Senator, you're recognized on Bill 361.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that Bill 361-33, as amended by the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs, and Procurement, be placed in the third reading, and I'd like to discuss it, please.
And that's as amended. You may proceed, Senator. That's as amended, right?
As amended, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you may proceed.
Yes, I qualified that.
So you want to tell us about 361?
Okay.
Yes, you may proceed.
All right. So Bill 361-33 is actually can be considered as a companion bill to Bill 360. So again, in layman's terms, what Bill 361 does is it authorizes the Chamorro Land Trust property to transfer 2,100 square meters of Chamorro Land Trust property, which is to the Guam Power Authority. The property, this 2,100 square meters of property that's to be transferred to GPA is actually contiguous to the existing property that Guam Power Authority is currently occupying with its substation. And the property is needed because GPA is going to have to install on that property an energy storage system, which is going to be connected to the solar power plant that's in Malolo. And basically what it does is the power that's generated at Malolo, the solar power unit, sends power down to Talafofo. Because of the variability, the fluctuations in that power source, it has to go through this energy storage system which stabilizes it before it can be fed into GPA's power system. So again, and there's already funds that are set aside by GPA for this energy storage system. They just basically need to have ownership of the property to be able to put this energy storage system in. So basically what we have is, we're now then taking the 3,200 square meters of land that GPA is currently occupying. We're going to expand that by another 2,100 square meters so that they can put in the energy storage system. And that would complete then the design that GPA needs up for it at Talafofo Power Station. So with that, Madam Speaker, I ask my colleagues to favorably consider the bill. Thank you.
Senator, do you mind on the maps that you included in the committee report there are two maps that you have here, one which has zoomed into that particular lot. If you can basically make reference to both bills, which is 216, which is 261, which is fronting route number 4.
Yeah, that's right. Route 4A is that's the Route 4A is the road that goes into the village. And as you're going into the village, the power station. Just give me a minute. I need to put on my glasses.
We'll take a brief recess. The legislature is back in session. Senator Tomada, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, we were on Bill 361, and a question was raised as to the orientation of what it is on the maps here. And so, if you just take a look at the map on Exhibit A, it shows there at the bottom of that map, Route 4A. That's the road that goes into the village coming from the golf course. Oh gosh. I guess I would have to show you, but I did show you the properties in question, and lot 427 and lot 42180 are both contiguous, and it is. If you're not sure where that's at, come and I'll show you.
Okay, so actually maybe based on that map, if they're looking at it almost like an L shape, then so on the back side is lot 421-80, and then the empty lot in front of it, which will be partitioned straight down.
That's right.
To form another box. Those are the two properties we're talking about in 361 and 362.
That's correct. And the property in front is where the existing power plant is currently situated.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator, for that explanation.
Thank you. And Madam Speaker, I'd just like to make one amendment on Bill 361.
And can you tell me the page?
On Section 4.
Yes.
Section 4 deals with the issue of rezoning, where right now the property is currently zoned agricultural, and we just want to rezone it to public facility. Basically I want to replace that language, and the new language should read, notwithstanding 21 GCA Section 61637 or any other provision of law, rule, or regulation, Lot 421-80, Municipality of Talafofo is hereby rezoned. Basically, that language that's there. So we just need to add the language in front, notwithstanding 21 GCA Section 61637 or any other provision of law, rule, or regulation.
Okay, Senator, that is a very
I got the amendment here.
I was going to say, because you were quoting, citing rather GCAs, and we just got to make sure we have it down. So legal counsel has that amendment as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then as soon as it's passed, can you please send it up to the clerk as well? So on that amendment, which is on page 3, line 17, on the rezoning, it would start off with notwithstanding 21 GCA, and then the section which is quoting the actual law, section by law. And that's why it's important that we have that cited correctly. So is there anyone like to speak on the amendment? There being none, no objections, and so ordered. Senator?
Madam Speaker, how do I go back? I need to make that same amendment on the preceding bill that just went down. Do we need to pull that out?
No, we need to do a notwithstanding to go back to motions, and then from motions we go down and pull it out, then we bring it up, then we pull the bill. So we can actually do that probably just towards, further down in session.
Can we do that? Can we do that right now? We'll send down 361 down to the voting file, and then if we can do a revert back.
Yes, we could. So let's finish one thing first. Let's just send this down first, and then we'll deal with that next question. So on the motion, is anyone first of all who would like to speak on 361? No objections? Objections, so ordered. Okay, now as the Assistant Majority Leader, then yes, you can make that motion notwithstanding.
Yeah, so Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I'd like to move that we pull...
Go back to motions.
Go back to motions.
Yes.
And
for the purpose of? For
the purpose of making further amendments to Bill 361.
Which is, so that everybody would know, because that's only for one specific purpose that we're bringing it back up. 360, to bring 360
to bring 360-33
to the second
back to
reading
second
file.
reading.
Yes.
Yes.
For the purpose of,
Making an amendment.
which is the rezoning using the same language that you used in 361.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
On that motion, yes. Well, we got somebody's questioning.
Madam
Senator
Speaker,
Uggan.
just on the motion, I'm not certainly in support of the motion, but I was in discussion with a number of our colleagues with regards to rescinding back 351 and to insert the Guam Fire Department into that piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. So if in fact we're in motions, then I would like to request that consideration also.
That's a totally different bill we're talking about. Right now, we're only dealing with 361.
I understand, Madam Speaker, but the motion is to go back to motions and to consider a piece of legislation to place it on the top of second reading with the express purpose of making an amendment.
When we do that, I'll recess so we can have that conversation, okay? But right now, let's deal with 360. So on the motion then, notwithstanding the House rules, to be able to pull Bill 360 out of the third reading file and tell you to go back, you're right, into motions to make then that amendment so that nobody's going to, bring in something from the back door. You're understanding that only for that purpose is to put the language of notwithstanding, of course, 21 GCA, which is by law, what needs to be done for the rezoning of agricultural to public facility. Okay, so does everybody understand that? So notwithstanding the House rules, we're going to go back to motions. No objection, so ordered. So now we are, you're right, on back to motions. And then Senator Ada, you're recognized now to make that motion to pull Bill 360 and put it on the second reading file.
Thank you. So, Madam Speaker, I move to pull Bill 360-33 from the third reading file back to the second reading for the purpose of making an amendment to Bill 360.
On that motion, no objections. So, wait, that first we have to act on that motion before what you want to do.
But we're still going to remain in motions, Madam Speaker?
No, not yet. We're finishing one thing, okay? Let's just finish 360. Yes. No, you can't. We'll do this separately. I don't want you to confuse, the clerks here as well. So that motion then is to now take Bill 360 and put it in the second reading file for the purposes of making a specific amendment to 360. On that motion, no objection, so ordered. So then now we are on motions, okay? Yes, we are in motion, but yes, you're right. So that's there already, Senator Ada, and I would recognize you in a few minutes until I figure out what Senator Uggan wants to do. So we're going to take a brief recess. The legislature is back in session. Senator Ada, you are recognized then on the, which is to make that motion on Bill 360, same way that you would normally do that to send it down to the third reading.
Right. So we've got the bill now in second reading. So my motion would be to place Bill 360 in third reading, and I would like to discuss it for the purpose of making an amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
So no objections, so ordered.
Right.
So Senator Ada.
So,
then-
Madam Speaker, on Bill 360, on page 3, starting at line 12, I would like to make the amendment by inserting the language, notwithstanding 21 GCA section 61637, comma, or any other provision of law, comma, rule or regulation, comma, and then all that phrase in front of the existing language, Lot 27, 427, Municipality of Talofofo is hereby rezoned from agricultural to public facility for the purpose of expanding the Talofofo substation and constructing the energy storage system. So that is the amendment that I would like to make to Bill 360-33.
Okay, on the amendment. No objection, so ordered. And your motion then to send it down
Yeah,
to?
so Madam Speaker, I move to send down Bill 360-33 to the third reading file and be placed before Bill 362-33.
Oh,
So that it doesn't get sent all the way down. Back to its original
Back to its original
position.
place.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on that motion, no objection, so ordered. Thank you. Senator Frank Ogden, you're recognized.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request, and notwithstanding the House rules, that we revert back to motions with the express purpose of placing Bill number 351-33, which is now in the third reading, back to the top of the second reading, and additionally with the express purpose of only inserting the languages in reference to the Guam Fire Department in the amended version.
Okay, does everyone understand that? On the motion, then, notwithstanding the House rules, is to be able to take Bill 351 out of the third reading file to be placed on the top of the second reading file for the purpose of adding one amendment which says, that makes reference to the Guam Fire Department, to include them with all the other law enforcement. No objection. Senator San Nicolas, you have a question about that motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I do. I may have some questions regarding the specific amendment, and it may require.
Well, when the time comes for him then to now motion the bill to third reading file, and he makes this motion, then yes, you'll be able to ask any questions then.
I'm just concerned about the motion being very narrow in only considering such and such, because then
because it's already in the third reading
Right.
file. That means a lot of discussion has taken place on it, and because there was an oversight by the chair, he said he'll take full, responsibility for that. That it was brought to his attention that the Guam Fire Department. And when all the other law enforcement were listed, that they were not included.
Right.
That was the reason why. Okay, but I mean, if you have any questions, yes, about the Guam Fire Department, I definitely will, allow you to speak. And while you have the floor, then you'll be able to speak on the main motion as well.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. So then, no objections, so ordered. So we're now on the second reading file. Senator Uggan, you are recognized.
Thank you very
Bill
much, Madam.
351.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move for the placement of Bill 351-33 into the third reading with one amendment that will be proffered shortly.
On that motion, then, there's no objections. You may proceed then, Senator, to discuss then 351 and then include your amendment.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker, and to all of our colleagues for allowing this process to proceed. Madam Speaker, there's an amendment that has been provided to yourself and to members of the body that would amend subsection 62225 and insert as number 7 the words all sworn officers of the Guam Fire Department, and then also insert the agency itself, Guam Fire Department, into the last paragraph of that section. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to move for the inclusion of this, or the adoption of this amendment, please.
Okay, so on the amendment, then, I know Senator San Nicolas, you did have, said you wanted to speak on it. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in just reviewing the bill and all the different agencies that are affected by what this law would do, my question was specific to whether or not these additional costs are already reflected in the current adopted budget for the fiscal year.
Okay, so Senator, do you yield to the question?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and to the Senator, thank you for asking that question. That was one of the concerns of members of the body when we initially discussed this piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. And because DOA would have to work with the respective law enforcement agencies, they are tasked with ensuring that sufficient revenues are part and parcel of their fiscal year 17 budget. And if we notice, the allocation for fiscal year 17 for most, if not all, of the law enforcement agencies did not take a drop, of which in fiscal year 16 up until June, hazardous pay was being allocated and paid out to our law enforcement agencies. So to me, the response is that it will not have any additional financial implications other than what it had realized in fiscal year 16.
Senator, was you able to answer your question?
I do appreciate the response. My concern is that I've recently been receiving contact from certain law enforcement agencies with respect to some of their existing employment provisions being considered for adjustment, namely, for example, the Guam Police Department and their current pay schedule of 86 hours going down to 80 hours. And I'm of the mind that the reason why these things are being considered is that the Consolidated Revenue and Expenditures Report for the current fiscal year is already showing a $10 million shortfall for the fiscal year. And so while I understand that we have been paying hazardous pay before, and while I understand that through the passage of this bill, the Department of Administration will need to provision for that because we're going to be mandating it, my concern is that do we have the existing financial capacity to be able to fund this additional expense when the current Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report is already showing a figure lower than what we projected, and when for example, the Guam Police Department is already seeming to explore reducing the compensatory hours under the current cost structure, not inclusive of this. So perhaps if I may pose a question to the budget chair as to whether or not this is something that's been funded. And the reason why I'm asking, Madam Speaker, is if this was a commitment that this government made to these employees, and it's a commitment that this body wants to consider honoring continuously, we either need to provision for it in the current budget and make sure that it's going to be funded, or we need to provision within the legislation that this won't be effective until the budget is either amended or until it's included in the next fiscal year. So if I may pose the question.
Yes, Mr. Vice Speaker, there's a question. The question has been posed to you by Senator San Nicolas.
The only thing that was budgeted for was the actual cost of the position. Hazardous pay is in addition to the additional amounts, because it is not 40 hours a week as hazardous. It's supposedly just when they're in hazardous situations. Those amounts were not budgeted for. And that's why I've been waiting for a fiscal note for the entire bill.
Senator, are you satisfied with the answer?
I appreciate the response as well, Madam Speaker, and it kind of puts the issue into perspective, because again, I have no problem honoring this commitment of our government if it's the will of the body. The concern is, do we have the allocated resources to be able to do so? And I think that it's necessary. I'm reviewing the bill, I'm reviewing the amendments that have previously been proffered, including this current amendment that's being proffered. And I just want to make sure that, because we're touching so many agencies in this bill, and given the information provided by the budget chairman, I just want to make sure that we're not going to be causing budgetary disruptions, across the board of so many agencies with respect to the passage of something like this, given the fact that it may not have been allocated in their current budgetary cost structures. So with respect to the amendment to include the Guam Fire Department, I can go ahead and allow us to move forward on that, but after that I would like the opportunity to pose an additional amendment that may provide a clearer direction as to how this act will be implemented, subject to the need for funding.
Okay, so on the motion, that's not an objection. Senate, well, we're going to have to, wait. So you're going to respond to, okay, so then, and I also have Senator Respicio. Actually, Senator Respicio was up first before Senator Agun. Senator Respicio.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and also I just talked to the sponsor of the bill that version doesn't take into account the earlier version that this body passed, which did something specifically for the Department of Youth Affairs. So that we can agree that that's, because if this amendment passes,
Yes,
then it reverts back to the original version.
But
and so,
we made sure that before we went in that legal counsel has actually the
okay, but
written amendment
but the copy that
passed.
But the
True.
copy that's being circulated does not reflect
You're
the
right,
updated
does not
one.
reflect.
So.
But legal counsel did bring that up,
Okay.
and the clerks.
Okay.
So they both have
Thank you.
the amendment that passed.
That's my only concern
Okay,
so
all
far.
right.
Thank
So,
you, Madam
so that's taken care of. So it's not being affected here. So senators, then you do remember that subsection 5 was amended, and the amended language is with the clerks and legal counsel. Okay, but the only change here that we're looking at really is subsection 7. So on that amendment, Senator Agun, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'm very appreciative in regards to the discussion as it applies to whether in fact funding is available. Because, Madam Speaker, this was part of the original conversation on this piece of legislation. It is a government-wide policy that we are proposing. So in this case, you have safeguards, Department of Administration working collectively with the administrators, the appointed administrators of these respective agencies, to ensure that in fact they can justify any additional hazardous pay above and beyond the pay of our law enforcement personnel. Madam Speaker, there was another issue that was mentioned in regards to the reduction of work hours from 86 to 80. That is an administrative decision on the part of the Chief of Police. And he's absolutely right. A number of police officers have raised concern with regards to that policy, but the issue that was shared indirectly with myself and my office in regards to that policy is that he continues to work and find ways to be able to contain costs, not at the expense of public safety, but at the expense of efficiency, because he also recognizes that there are some responsibilities and prior obligations that the department has to address within this fiscal year. And he's made that commitment to his law enforcement, his police officers. He's made that commitment to the entire leadership within the Guam Police Department, and that is really where the administrative component comes in. We set the policies and the guidelines, and that is what this proposal is, to establish a government-wide policy and ensure that if there's any requirement for additional cost containment, that be implemented between the Department of Administration as well as the appointing authorities of these agencies. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the motion, then, there are no objections, so ordered. On the main motion, Senator Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're currently in the process of drafting a few amendments for consideration. If I may request a brief recess, and if the body would like to continue on with other legislation, we could, if the sponsor is so willing, set it aside while the amendments are being prepared.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to set this aside then, because I don't know how long it would take to have your amendment ready. And so then we'll continue with other companion bills by Senator Ada, which is, oh no, that's not a companion bill, it's a series of companion bills. So I'm gonna, as a rule, I always go back then, so I will head back to, again, Senator Agun, your bill on 285 that was set aside. You want to do that in the afternoon? Oh, okay, sure, not a problem then. So Senator Ada, we'll continue with you then with Bill number 362-33.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 362-33. Oh,
Yes,
Yes,
the motion first.
I'd like to move to place Bill 362-33 COR as amended by the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs, and Procurement to the third reading, and I would like to discuss it.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Bill 362-33 basically moves to, I guess, further an earlier piece of legislation that was passed by this legislature in the 30th Guam Legislature, which set aside property. Actually, it had authorized setting aside of 1 acre in the north and 1 acre in the south to provide land for the purpose of being able to grow local herbs, and it was to be named the Hatdin Amot Chamorro. What Bill 362-33 does is it really brings a lot more specificity to that idea, and instead now identifies a specific location in the north, in the Mangilao area, an area of 15 acres. And basically that's Chamorro Land Trust property for the purpose of establishing the Hatdin Amot Chamorro. And this movement was actually brought to the attention of the office by the Hadza Foundation, which has been working for the past decade in trying to preserve the local healing art. But in addition to that, it needs, of course, to be able to have access to the local medicinal herbs. And so the Bill 362 then sets aside the 15 acres in an area it identifies specific area, Block 3, Track 1722, and to designate that area as a biodiversity conservation easement for the purpose of providing land for Hatdin Amot Chamorro. Now, during the public hearing, the question was raised was, what do we mean by a biodiversity conservation easement? And actually, if you take a look, I mean, if you Google the term itself, defining biodiversity is defined as the variability among living organisms from all sources, including it gets real complex. And but basically, what we want to do is to set aside an area of 15 acres. That hopefully will be able to cordon off and be able to just basically the local herbs that are being salvaged from behind the military fences. It is hoped that we can bring a lot of those plants down into this area where they'll be able to hopefully grow and continue to propagate, so that it will be available for our local healers to continue the local art of healing. And so what this does is it identifies more specifically than what the bill did in the 30th legislature an area of 15 acres in Mangilao to be able to actually grow these medicinal plants, and then of course the Chamorro Land Trust will have to be the one to determine basically how that land will be used and the leasing of it. So I think the bill is really pretty self-explanatory. And I would ask that if there's any questions, then hopefully I can try and answer it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Tong. And, Madam Speaker, I understand you wish to be heard. Any other senator wish to be heard on the bill after the Speaker? Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill, and I thank, of course, the primary sponsor for asking if I could participate as a co-sponsor. And I jumped at the opportunity primarily because for some time now, several years, as a matter of fact, I've been working with the HATA group and even attended several workshops with the group about the Atden Amut Chamorro. In this last Festival of the Pacific, all of the Joamtis throughout the Pacific actually met in my conference room to be able to continue with the work that they're doing to form a consortium of these traditional healers throughout the islands, because they too are finding that they are slowly losing their tradition of natural herbs in healing our people. We're seeing that it's far worse on Guam than it is in some of the other islands, primarily because some of the things that has happened most recently is that with this military buildup, is that many of these herbal plants, medicinal plants, are inside the base and in the north. The concern was that these medicinal plants grow in certain parts of our islands, and they're not all in one place. So there are definitely those that are in the north and thrive in the north, with the type of soil that is there. There are those also that can thrive in central, and of course those in the south, and sometimes only unique to those places. The other thing is that every time the military is going to consider going in to bulldoze an area, then based on the agreement is that they would have to put a call out to all of our Surahanas and Surahanos and those who practice the tradition to give them permission to go into the base to collect these plants. The unfortunate thing about it is that some of these, you can't just pick them at the hour set by the military. Some of these we know, our people know, that there are certain times of the day that they should be picked, and not necessarily at midday. Some would have to be very early in the morning, and some before sunset. So the hope is in this bill is by putting aside lands so that then these practices, these indigenous practices of traditional healing through medicinal plants then, can thrive, can continue, and also the hopes of teaching the younger generation about this particular practice. And since the discussion of this that has occurred many years ago, as a result of that very first conference that we had, several of our young people are actually going through the training already. 2 young ladies that I know personally that are going through the training, and they're being trained not just by being mentored by our Surahanas and Surahanus here on island, but even those in our neighboring islands. And we have, unfortunately, we have just lost one of them, and he's been also instrumental in teaching the practice and perpetuating our natural flora that will be used for traditional healing. Now, the concern, I feel, of course, that it's so unfortunate that although we have sections of the island that will be set aside for these plants in the north and kind of semi-central, that we're not going to be able to have anything in the south. And that is really very unfortunate, primarily because when you think, about traditional healing, traditional practices, a lot of it really are practiced in the south, and that, they're known for that, and everyone looks to the south, you see, always for this. But it's unfortunate that in the original bill, the language that was placed there has been deleted and amended, of course, in this bill to no longer reflect that. I don't know, of course, what else could be done in the hopes that maybe another village maybe in the south that would be considered. But it's really unfortunate anyway, and I just thought I would share that with you. The big concern also that actually came about, and this is always related to future activities like the military buildup and what is happening in the lands that our people once were living on, and where our people would go to be able to collect these plants. There was a big concern when Pagat was named originally for the firing range, because then there are so many medicinal plants there that our people, our Surahanes and Surahanos, or our Joamtis, have actually gone there and continue to go there to be able to collect those plants for treatment. The concern that the group Haja has right now, and like the author had said, that the concern was the term that we were using here, biodiversity, and he proceeded to give a definition, but it's such a complicated definition as well. And I'm just wondering whether maybe there should be a section to actually put the definition of biodiversity. And primarily because then I think it's something we want to read as well and have a better understanding of it, and to see how maybe it could be and how it can be impacted with the military buildup, that maybe there are just some of those things in the definition that we just can't do or might be prohibitive. I'm not sure. And unless there is a definition already in another bill, which I know the author of that bill as well, when we did the leasing of a sliver of land right next to the existing zoo, the only zoo that we have in Tuman. And so, Mr. Vice Speaker, I mean, if you would allow for us to be able to work with the author on that particular definition, that maybe one we put here, because I would hate that we talk about it and it's part of the bill, but we really don't know what the definition is. And I want to be really cautious about it, only in the sense that we don't know what the future impact will be. And granted, we can't, look into the future, but I think that we could actually be able to determine to some degree what that impact would be with that definition of biodiversity, and how then it will be tied into these particular lots that will be used for the planting of medicinal plants. So I know, again, I don't want to set this aside, but maybe might be, since the chairman was reading a definition, that might be the definition that we could use.
I will take a short recess, and you work that out, and you can resume your chair.
The legislature is back in session. There is more discussion and amendments to be made with 362, so rather than continue to be in recess for that, we're going to move on to 365. Senator Ada, you're recognized.
No. Bill 365, Madam Speaker, I move that Bill 365-33, as amended by the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs, and Procurement, be placed in the third reading, and I would like to discuss it, please.
You may proceed, Senator.
So, Madam Speaker, basically what this bill does really is it just basically solidifies the process of how the Municipal Planning Council is to be informed whenever a land use application has been submitted to the Department of Land Management. Basically, the process that has been established by law is that when a developer submits a land use application, copies are made and is provided to an entity called the Application Review Committee. This Application Review Committee is comprised of representatives from the various agencies, such as the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, the utilities, DPW, etc. And what they do is they use their expertise and they review this application to see what impacts the proposed project might have. And then their input is provided to the Guam Land Use Commission, which then has by law the authority to finally decide on whether to approve or disapprove the application. Now, the law also requires that this application be discussed at the village level and requires that the Municipal Planning Council conducts a public meeting in their village to discuss the project that is being proposed in their municipality. The problem with that is that when that Municipal Planning Council is convened, it is not necessarily informed by the findings of the Application Review Committee. So let's take, for example, what happened up at Pago Bay. That application came in. The Application Review Committee did their review and sent those findings down to the Guam Land Use Commission. In the meantime, the law requires that a public meeting be conducted to inform the public about this proposed project. And they did that. But the only people that were there at that village hearing was the developer. And of course, the developer is going to basically give you, I guess you could say, their view of all the great things that this project will do. And doesn't really provide I would suggest that they probably wouldn't provide, the balanced view of, yes, it will bring these benefits, but it will also have these negative impacts, etc. So as a result, this Municipal Planning Council is convened, but is not fully informed. And as a result, they then afterwards would submit their recommendation to the Guam Land Use Commission as to whether to approve or disapprove the project, and basically have a basis for their recommendation. So basically, all this does is that it adds Bill 365, adds a new section, and simply puts a requirement that before municipal planning hearings, and it basically outlines that when Department of Land Management receives a land use application, a copy shall be submitted to the mayor of the affected municipality. In any land use action that requires the review and decision by the Guam Land Use Commission, no municipal public hearing shall be scheduled and conducted in the affected municipality until a preliminary report at the minimum has been received by the department from the Department of Land Management. To the maximum extent possible, said preliminary report shall be provided by the Application Review Committee within 30 days from the filing. So all it's saying is, before that municipal planning council is convened, at least provide them with some initial findings from the technical experts as to what is the implication of this project that is being proposed in their village. And then the request of the mayor, permanent voting members of the application. And so also in addition to that, if the mayor, upon their initial review of the findings and the application, may request that members of the application review committee to be present at the municipal planning council so that these technical experts can then answer whatever questions that the council members might have. So that's all that it does, is we want to make sure that when the municipal planning council is convened, it has some credible technical information that they can use in their decision-making process to decide whether to lend their support or not for a project. So that, Madam Speaker, is really an overview of Bill 365-33.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the motion, Mr. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 365. I had an hour discussion with the mayor of Chalampago about the situation that happened in Pago Bay. It's not a question of whether or not they did or did not have the ARC report. The committee, the problem was that the ARC recommended against the project moving forward. It recommended tabling the project. So I think what we need to do is we need to give teeth to the ARC or abolish the GLUC and allow the technical people to make the decisions. But I believe that the municipalities should have the benefit of the professional report, should have the benefit of the professionals being at the meeting to discuss it with them, and so I support the bill. But I don't believe that that's where the problem that we have that needs to be addressed. Both municipal planning councils were fully aware of the ARC recommendation to table, and that's why they were so vehement in their insistence that the project be stopped. It was the GLUC that moved in spite of the ARC recommendation. It's like us moving in spite of not getting a fiscal note.
On the motion, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I certainly stand in support of this proposed legislation. It's perhaps one of the sideline discussions that took place as a result of a previous piece of legislation that was held at a public hearing. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move for an amendment on page 2 on line 24 to delete the word preliminary. It's either they finalize a report, present it to the Department of Land Management so that the mayors and the residents will be able to see the report that is going to be provided by the Application Review Committee. So I'd like to move for consideration on the deletion of that word preliminary.
So there's actually 3. So in lines 26
You're right, Madam Speaker.
and then page 3, also line 2. So there all says preliminary. Is it just only for 24? Line 24?
No, you're correct. I apologize, Madam Speaker, yes.
So your amendment then would be to delete the word preliminary on line 24, 26, and page 3, line 2. So I want to make sure that, first of all, that is what you're thinking of.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for that clarification.
So on the amendment, Mr. Vice Speaker, you recognize.
While I support the amendment, I think the amendment probably should be any and all reports and position statements. If we want to make the municipal planning councils fully informed of all of the facts, if we're going to provide anything to them, then we should at least have the decency to provide any and all reports,
so I'm
preliminary and whatever. If it's only preliminary, then they should get it, because that's the only thing that they're having before them when they've been presented. And that's the thing that they've been complaining about, is that sometimes it takes so long or they're so late that they don't have a final report, and they don't have it. So it's just any and all reports and position statements of the ARC should be provided to the municipal planning councils.
Okay, so Senator, then but I need to, first of all, just delete the word preliminary, and then I recognize you for your amendment to the amendment. Okay? Are you okay with that? So on the deletion of the word preliminary, which is on page 2, lines 24, 26, and then on page 3, line 2.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes, Senator?
Wasn't the previous speaker's statement the amendment to an amendment?
No, I'm not doing that. I'm doing only the preliminary first, and then I'll recognize the Vice Speaker for his any and all reports and position statements.
Okay, thank you, Madam
Okay. So on just for the preliminary word deleted, no objection, so ordered. So now then it stands as a report, and Mr. Vice Speaker, on your amendment then.
Madam Speaker, if we're going to have the municipal planning councils informed, then it should be further amended to be any and all reports. And if preliminary report is the only report that's available at the time the municipal planning council is meeting, then this action of the legislature should not be taken as legislative history, prohibiting them receiving the preliminary report. I want to make that very clear, because sometimes they may meet so early that all there is available is a preliminary report. So if we struck it, that's fine. But now I want to make sure that any and all reports
And what about
and
your
position papers, position statements should be made available to them.
Okay, so on the amendment, to amend the amendment now in this case, because it's just reports, but it will be any and all reports and position statements on that amendment. Any discussion? Senator Agun, I know you raised your hand earlier when okay, so Senator then Espaldon, you recognize on the amendment, on the Vice Speaker's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the thought that goes into this, because I'm in total agreement. However, I guess the question that needs to be asked is whether the meeting, the municipal public hearings, when will they meet? In other words, if you say any and all, and they meet before all reports have been done, is the municipal planning council then subject to have another hearing once they receive all reports?
So are you forming that as a question to the
Yes.
mover of the amendment?
Yes.
Mr.
And I'm
Biden?
just trying to work through the sequence
Sure.
in my mind of how this all
Okay.
happens, because if the wording is going to be in effect, and words mean something,
Mm-hmm.
and we're saying that any, all, and all report, before they can have a meeting, they should receive any and all reports. If in the event they have a meeting, and then another report comes out, an example was provided by the mover of this amendment, that perhaps at the meeting all they're going to have is a preliminary report, and then there are other reports that are then generated after the meeting does that then necessitate that another meeting be held by the Municipal Planning Council? Or how long do they have to wait before they can expect to receive the final report?
Mr. Vice Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Yes, I yield, and I thank the good senator for asking the question. That is exactly the point, is that sometimes it is very early, and land management tells them, all we have is this. These are the only things that we have. And they make a decision. But if additional reports are being generated and come later, the Municipal Planning Council should also get those to determine whether or not they want to reconsider their position with the additional reports. But the thing is that I thought we were trying to make them as informed as possible at whatever time. I mean, it's like us. It's all public hearings and all statements that we know as of this date, we've made a decision. All fiscal notes as of this date, we make a decision. But if we find out later that it's going to cost more, then we'll reconsider. But the thing is that to try to figure out whether or not means they can't meet until there's all reports. When is it going to be all reports? It's all reports at the time that they've scheduled a Municipal Planning Council meeting to discuss and decide this issue.
So
it would seem.
Senator, was he able to respond to your question?
Yes, he has responded to the question. And I guess what my takeaway from that, and I don't disagree, but my takeaway from that is that they would then, if they have a meeting based upon some reports that they had at the time that they scheduled the meeting, and then more reports or position statements are submitted after the fact of the meeting, there does not necessarily have to be a subsequent municipal meeting to consider all those extra generated reports and position statements. And so I guess that would be at the call of the mayor, I would imagine. So there may be instances where their preliminary report may show one thing, let's say a good position on a certain project, and the Municipal Planning Council comes in, and because everything looks good, that they vote in favor of a certain project, and then after the fact, they then receive other information and position statements, then the mayor doesn't necessarily have to call a meeting of the Municipal Planning Council, even though those additionally generated statements and positions may be 180 degrees different from the preliminary report. And I suppose in my mind that is kind of like when you're thinking this process through, that could also become a negative factor of having to call a meeting without the full information. But I guess we'll leave that to the mayor's discretion, and that's my understanding of the way this has been presented. I have no objection to it. I'm just thinking through the process to make sure that it makes sense and it achieves exactly, because it doesn't necessarily achieve, I believe, the intent of this legislation and the intent of this amendment, because there is that loophole that in the end, after the meeting, there is no requirement to come back if new and additional reports are then thrown in. And we could end up with the same situation that we have been faced now, in particular at the Pago Bay project, right, where the initial report, like I said, may be glowing in favor of its proceeding forward, but then and then the Municipal Council meets, and then subsequent reports and position statements might show a different position, which might be in the negative, and there is no guarantee that anybody will see that except the mayor. I just want to bring that up for the enlightenment of this body. It's part of the process that I think we need to at least think about, And at this time, though, I have no objection to this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bottom line, and because it does say, because it does say on page 2, line 25, to the maximum extent possible, said report shall be provided by the ARC within 30 days of the filing of the application. And they'll make a good effort, but 30 days is a very short period of time for all the agencies to do a review on a project, to put their positions in, and if, at that time, within 30 days, they submit something, the ARC submits something, that's when the municipal council can act, but anything afterwards, there is no guarantee that any subsequent information will be provided to the municipal planning council for them to then determine. It's not mandated. I just want to bring that awareness to this body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the amendment, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't know if I'm going to raise this as a point of information or while I appreciate and I recognize the concerns brought up with the amendment, and while I agree, I also have to point out that in the legislative intent, actually, on page 2, starting basically on line 11, it says the legislature Guam intends to ensure that no municipal public hearing shall be scheduled until such time that all ARC official position statements are made part of the project application. So I'm just concerned that while this was the intent, when we go to basically what the section provides, talking apples and oranges here. Because an official statement basically means it's final. So, I prefer to keep in line with what the intent is. So I don't see how preliminary report, I have to agree that any and all reports, but it has to be an official statement. So again, there's conflict between what we intend, what we're trying to do in Section 2 and what we see in legislative intent.
But you just mentioned official position statements.
Exactly.
So do you want to amend the amendment by adding official?
Well, we need to dispose of that amendment first before we move forward, don't we?
But no, you can. You can do it actually. This is only
I
first.
forgot what the amendment
Yeah,
was.
right. Oh, it says any and all reports
Yeah.
and position statements. But you wanted it to be an official, so therefore you can amend this to add the word official.
I just want to make sure,
You want to make sure first find out whether it will pass first or
the
not?
author first, okay?
Okay, so we'll take a brief recess then.
Thank you.
First of all, I think
The legislature is back in session. Senator Frank Blas, I know we left off with some questions. You conferred with the author? Okay, so is there anyone else who would like to speak on the amendment? Oh, you want to now speak then? Okay. So let me see. So you're right. So you are next then on the amendment by the Vice Speaker, right? Is that where you want to speak? On the bill. Okay. First, let's take care of the amendment then. On the Vice Speaker's amendment, which is to add now the words any and all reports and position statements. And at the time when Senator Spauldon was speaking, he was making reference to official position statements, which of course Senator Blas brought up, and that's on page 2, line 12. And I had wondered whether he wanted then to proffer that as an amendment to the amendment, but I haven't heard, and I don't know if that's going to be considered. So that's where we left off. So on the amendment then, is there anyone else who would like to speak on the Vice Speaker's amendment? There being none. His amendment is any and all reports and position statements, which will be for lines 24, 26 on page 2, and line 2 on page 3. Any and all reports and position statements.
How about if we say any and all available reports?
Then that will be an amendment to the amendment. So I will recognize you if you want, because we are now on his amendment.
But that'll be the third amendment.
No, because we finished. Remember, I wanted to just delete the preliminary that takes it away. So. Okay, I just conferred with the clerks, and they want to make sure that it's clear to everyone that we've just deleted preliminary before the word reports, but now what we're replacing here, other than just report now, it'll be these words, any and all reports and position statements. So that means it'll be a deletion of the report with this new language. So Senator Ada, you're recognized on the amendment.
Yes, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I would like to proffer an amendment to the amendment to read on line 24, until that a public hearing shall be scheduled, no public hearing shall be scheduled and conducted in the affected municipality until all available reports and position statements have been received from the Department of Land Management. And we would also delete the two words at minimum.
Okay, so we'll do that. I'll do that separately. But right now it would be any, so originally we have any and all reports, but you're amending to add the words available. So any and all available reports and position statements.
Have been received. Delete the words at minimum.
Okay, all right, I see what you mean.
So you read
Have
until
been,
any and all available reports and position statements have been received from the Department of Land Management.
okay, so it's just to change from has to have.
Correct.
Okay, so on that amendment to the amendment, to add the word available. Remember, now we're just dealing with the available first, because we're going backwards. So no objections to the word available. So ordered. And now the whole amendment, any and all available reports and position statement have, and of course from has to have. That will be a technical correction. Any objections to the amendment that has been amended? No objections, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. So on the main now motion, and he just left, Senator Ogden. He wanted to speak on the main. Senator Frank Ogden. He had wanted, I have him listed. Can you guys check if he's out there? Because now we're in the main motion. Okay, well, Senator, so would anyone like to speak on the main motion? Senator Tom Ada, then on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to just make one last amendment. And, you know, in as much as on the bills that I introduce, I normally have a Section 1 legislative findings and intent, and it kind of gives a point of reference. But sometimes also when you provide the findings and intent, and sometimes we get wrapped around the axle, and that is, I think, that has caused some consternation among some of the members with some of the language that's been used. So what I would like to do is just move to delete Section 1 and just get to the meat of the bill.
Get to the meat of it. So it'll be to delete Section 1 and then to allow legal counsel to renumber then the different sections. On that motion to delete Section 1, no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to move then that we place Bill 365-33 as amended down in the third reading, down to the voting file.
On the motion to send 365 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'll recognize Mr. Vice Speaker in 373-33.
Thank you very much, Madam
373.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 373-33 in the third reading file and ask for a short opportunity to speak.
You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, in order to be able to keep my license not so much active, but even if in the inactive status, I have to attend continuing legal education. And I'm hoping you mention CLEs today when you speak to the swearing in. I attended a domestic violence conference that was hosted by the Unified Judiciary. And it was an excellent conference because in it, or during the conference, it became clear to me that we had a definition that was inaccurate. We've been using choking locally to describe what is more correctly the act of strangulation. Someone chokes on water if it goes down the wrong pipe, or someone chokes on a piece of food that goes down the wrong pipe, but is strangled when someone places pressure on their neck for the purpose of stopping the flow of air or their ability to be able to breathe. And I really do think that it's imperative that we amend this section to add a new section, to add a new definition of strangulation to be defined as when a person knowingly or intentionally against the will of another impedes the normal breathing or circulation of the blood of another by applying pressure to the throat or neck or by blocking the nose or mouth of another. And so I'd like to make that amendment. And I'd like to make that amendment, Madam Speaker, in our definition as it relates to acts that are considered family violence. I think just within since introducing this legislation, I think there have been 2 or 3 magistrate reports that have, unfortunately, reported incidences where there has been domestic violence, where the strangulation was, it was described as someone was being strangled and not being choked. But we need to make that amendment so that in the future people don't get off because it's the wrong definition. And so it's imperative that we change the statute. And why it's important to address this one issue as a separate incident is that and not to lighten say that any domestic violence is okay. But when someone is slapped or an object is thrown at them, it's in an act of violence. It is an act of violence, but it's impetuous. But when someone purposely puts their hands around your neck and tries to cut off your circulation, or someone puts you in a chokehold with their arm, as we've seen with a couple of the deaths that happened recently in fights, it means to stop that person's breathing, and maybe they think it's only going to stop their breathing momentarily, but that momentary stoppage of air could be permanent, or the damage could be permanent in that the blood not being able to be reaching the brain could have some major brain damage. And so it is a very, very frightening thing when a person does the strangulation. And as the speaker at the conference described it, when someone does an act of attempting to strangle his or her partner, or whatever the pronoun is to make it when they attempt to strangle the other, they mean harm. I mean, they mean to do some harm, and it's usually a precursor and an indication that at some point later it's going to mean that they want to do something to end that person's life. Throwing something across the room is impetuous, but strangling them means, I want you to know I have control of your life in my hand or within my arms in this chokehold, and you don't comply with what I want, and the next time I will hold it longer until you're gone. And so I ask that my colleagues, as we end this month of recognition of domestic violence, that we amend the statutes on domestic violence to include this definition, to make sure that no one gets away with the act of strangulation, because the definition in the statute is imprecise. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the motion, Senator Espaldon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I definitely appreciate this addition to the law. However, the couple points I need to at least address, and one is that in his presentation, the mover of this amendment basically alluded to a situation where there was a fight, and it did not technically involve a family member. It involved a fight in which somebody put a stranglehold or a chokehold around the neck of another person, and that person did, I believe, eventually pass away. Right now, this definition only is included in the family violence. I'm sorry,
No,
excuse me, I just
it's
looked
the
at...
two different
I'm
sections.
sorry. On the first page,
Yes.
it is in the criminal statute, and the
Okay.
second page, it's in the
It's
family
from-
violence. So
Okay.
it's both. It's in
Yes,
the criminal statute, so that that event that happened behind one of the bars in Tumon is addressed, and on the second page, it's a domestic
Yes.
violence issue.
My oversight, and the author is definitely correct, and I apologize for that, Madam Speaker. The other point, though, I'd like to move on to would be the term, well, it reads basically, knowingly or intentionally against the will of another, impeding the normal breathing or circulation of the blood of a family or household member by applying pressure to the throat or neck, or by blocking the nose or mouth of a family or household member, or of another, let's just put it that way. I guess the issue I have that concerns me a little bit is that in a situation where a parent places their hand over their child's mouth because the child is either speaking out and throwing a tantrum, or for whatever reason, the act of putting your hand over that child's mouth then makes you, by this definition, guilty of strangulation. And again, that in itself might be an unintended consequence that shouldn't suffer such a dire effect on somebody if they were just putting their hand over somebody's mouth, but to silence them for whatever reason. I mean, we've seen that in some situations where a parent will, kind of clasp their hand over the mouth. And I'm just wondering if we really do want to allow that little phrase over the mouth of another, placing a hand or blocking the mouth of another, really would then, whether we want to include that as part of the definition of strangulation. And I understand that he came from the conference and that was probably part of the suggested definition for strangulation, but it seems to me that we could have some consequence to really an act where a parent is trying to silence their child and then all of a sudden becomes possibly a felon just for that. And I just want to raise that point and ask if that is what the author intends.
Mr. Vice Speaker, do you yield to the question?
If it was the intent, yes. And there is a process within the CPS. I mean, even the corporal punishment is part of the Family Violence Act. But there are gradations, and it is addressed separate within an individual intent. I'd hate to remove that section when part of the strangulation process or impeding the breathing could be just cutting off people's over their mouth. And I don't know if I want to wait until we have an incident where a child's breathing completely stops. If a little child has a major cold and isn't able to breathe, I mean, even when we're sleeping and we have a cold and we don't have, and we aren't having, we can't breathe very clearly through our nose, if someone puts something over our mouth, it could stop our breathing. All three areas are to cut for the purpose of cutting off air. The act of trying to silence a child with putting a hand over their mouth is not to try to cut off their air, but to silence them. But then again, the whole entire act of putting a hand on the mouth of your spouse or another family member is to silence them. Is to tell them, you don't you tell me that I can't go out drinking with the boys or I can't go out with the girls.
I'm going to take a brief recess. The legislature's back in session. Senator Spaldon, we left off with you.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I'm just a little concerned. I mean, I'm not going to make an objection or amendment, but I am concerned because I think all of us has seen that instance where a parent, perhaps to calm a child down or to basically show him that he's speaking out of turn or speaking irrationally or whatnot, they place a hand over the child's mouth. And it may not be, again, and as I read this, I see how it can be, perhaps my concern shouldn't be a concern because there has to be a certain mens rea, a certain mindset that the parent knowingly and intentionally wanted to cut off the normal breathing or the circulation of blood by covering the mouth. And I would have to probably agree with the author that within the Child Protective Service, they will vet this out. But it does seem that on the outside, it just says a person is guilty of strangulation if they do that. And but for now, I'll concede the point to the author of the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. So on the motions, anybody else would like to speak? Mr. Vice Speaker, you want to close?
I just want to assure my colleagues that there is a difference in the intent to silence a child and the intent to stop this breathing and circulation. It's putting your hand over the mouth to tell the baby to stop talking, and it's different when they put the pillow on top of the baby's mouth and nose to stop its breathing, to end its life.
So
the intent is completely different.
Okay,
and I'm sure even the prosecutor's office can figure that one.
Okay. So on the motion then to send Bill 373, I want to make sure I get that right, 373 to the third reading file without any objections. No objections, so ordered. Thank you. Mr. Vice Speaker, on 378.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, also at the same conference, it was brought to my attention that there has been in the old days, it was, they would pull the phone out of the wall and throw it across the room so that the victim would not be able to make a report to the police. Now the new practice is to just grab the cell phone and smash it, or grab the cell phone and throw it across the room and prevent the person from calling 911. This, I'd like to move 378 to the third reading file and ask for an opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. You may proceed, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Again, Madam Speaker, this is to address a situation that is happening, and we saw it. I think it was 2 days after I introduced this bill that we had the incident up at the old Vidalia Mansion, where the former spouse kidnapped the ex-wife and her current and dragged them up to the top of the mansion and took their phones away and threatened to push them off the ledge and told them that they couldn't call the police. That's a perfect example, just very recent, not even history, just current events within the last month, of a need to have this kind of legislation to make sure that any attempt to prevent the person from reaching 911 to get to safety and to get protection from the police would be a completely separate crime. And I think that incident at the mansion describes how important this is that neither the boyfriend nor the ex could call the police because the perpetrator grabbed the phones immediately and prevented them from access to the phones. And so this is to make it a completely separate offense when that is done. And I'm hoping that I get support in this one also.
On the motion, Senator Blush, I recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this legislation. However, I don't mean to nitpick, but when I look at on page 2, line 11, recklessly prevents or attempts to prevent. I know what this is intending to do, and I am all for it. I just have an issue with regards to reckless prevent. It's a good versus bad thing. And so I'm just going to proffer and hope we can gain a discussion from this. Again, it's not to change the intent of this, it's just to make it strong. Is to change prevents to recklessly causes to deny. And then also subsequently on line 12, attempts to cause to deny. So I guess that's where my concern is. So I just proffer that amendment.
Okay.
Just for a discussion, and if it passes, pass. It doesn't, then I just...
Okay, so can you tell me the page and the line again? And then
it's actually on line 11, page 2, lines 11 and 12.
Page 2, line 11.
Where it says prevents, and then on line 12 it says prevent. Just change prevents to causes to deny.
Causes to prevent.
Causes to deny.
I'm sorry, line 11.
Right.
Right?
Line 11, the word prevent.
Well, we have prevents,
Right.
and then we got 12 prevent.
Right. So
but,
prevents is, okay,
yes.
causes to deny.
Causes to deny.
Right.
Okay. And to delete prevents.
And or attempts to cause to deny.
Or attempts
To cause
to
deny.
To deny. Okay. All right. On the amendment, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, causes to deny presumes that there was a request, and in the middle of a fight, you don't stop to say, honey, can I call the police?
Okay. On the amendment, is there anybody else? I presume then, Mr. Vice Speaker, you're objecting to that amendment? Okay. Okay, so then, can I hear it though? So okay. You're right. Okay, so then therefore, will there be a withdrawal of your amendment? Okay, no objection to the withdrawal of the amendment, so ordered. Thank you. So we're still on the motion. Is there anybody else? Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just rise in full support of this bill number 378-33, and I think it's an excellent example of how the author of this bill took advantage of attending an event that brought some subject matter experts to Guam to discuss the topic. And it also is a very fitting piece of legislation as we came to the end of the Bullying Prevention Month. Because what this does is it acts another cause of action in a line of actionable causes, you know, if there's charges that are brought against someone who acts violently against another. And you know, the whole idea with bullying too is you want to be able to give voice and to give power to the victim to come forward and seek justice. And I think that this type of a legislation gives even more power and gives another measure to the victim, another means of the victim to seek help and to speak out when there are crimes committed against them. So I rise in full support. I think it's an excellent culmination of the conference that was held by the judiciary or sponsored by the judiciary, and I rise in full support. Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak? None. On the motion, then, to send Bill number 378 to the third reading file without any objections. I'm sorry, you wanted to close?
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to say that with this era of communications, as readily as it is, I want to acknowledge that there was a local telephone company that I can't even remember whether it was this year or last year, that asked all of us if we had old cell phones to donate it to them to have it refurbished and cleaned and given to victims of domestic violence so that they would have the ability to be able to call for help at whenever their life was in danger. And I want to commend GTA for that call out and the move to try to assist people that would be the only way to be able to do that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that in the effort to try to have communication to the police and medical attention, that one of our local companies has been a good corporate citizen in this fight against domestic violence and the need to effectively communicate. And so with that, I'd like to just move the bill down to the voting file.
So on the motion, then, to send 378 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Okay, Senators, we are going to recess for lunch. However, I'd like to reiterate what bills we will take up this afternoon at 2, that has been set aside: 285, 354. So 285 is Senator Uggan, 354 Senator Espadon, 362 Senator Tom Ada, and then we will continue on again with the other bills in the numerical order. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, and 351, because that was brought up to the top of the third reading file. So that will be the very first one, 351. Okay, so please prepare and be here at 2 o'clock this afternoon.